Yes, you. Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Hey, any youngers, it's me, your host, Jen Glantz. Welcome back to another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. Hi, how are you? Can you believe that summer's almost over? It's so crazy to me because I feel like for the majority of the year, especially if you live in a place that's cold, all you think about is summer, 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 and then it happens, and it feels like summer lasts only a weekend. It flies by. It's so crazy, and as we are about to head to the end of summer, I'm so curious, what do you plan to do with your final weekends of pure sunshine, probably a little bit of rain too, maybe some beach time, and just the overall feeling that this is the season for everything relaxation and chill. Though I gotta be honest with you, I feel like I've been a little bit too relaxed this summer. I've taken full advantage of long walks around the park in Brooklyn and lounging outside in the sun, and I'm sort of ready for that cold weather to kick my butt back into those coffee shops, hunker down on my computer, and busting out a lot of hopefully new cool projects. Every so often on this podcast, I like to do an Ask Jen Anything show because you hear my voice week after week, and I find it so important that we get to know each other and that you get to know the person behind the voice. I spend so much time interviewing other people. I spend so much time just dropping you some advice, but I really want to make sure that you know and you trust and you understand the person that I am, especially because maybe you just started listening to this show and you're wondering, who in the world is this Jen girl? Or maybe you've known me since childhood. You've known me for so long. But regardless, I want to get deep and I want to get personal with you. And during these Ask Me Anythings, I commit to answering any question that you have. The questions I'm going to answer right now came from people in the You're Not Getting Any Younger secret Facebook group. If you're not in it, why are you not in it? Come hang out with us right now. As I go through these questions, I'll do my best to be completely honest with you. Let's kick things off. The first question right now is from Marissa. Marissa wants to know, Jen, I know you spent a year and a half living out of a suitcase. Where are you living now? Marissa, that is a great question. So those of you who are new to my life and who I am, for an entire year and a half, my boyfriend at the time, Adam, and I, we sold everything we owned and we lived in a new city almost every month. We did not live in New York. We lived all over. We lived in Portland, Austin, Denver, Chicago, all over the country. And it was such a cool experience for a year and a half. We would find places to live by using Airbnb and Facebook groups and Craigslist. We both work from home, so we would work in a coffee shop from a new city that we lived in and explore at night or on the weekends. And it was so much fun. And I loved the nomadic life. But the problem was, you always miss what you don't have, and a part of me craved stability. A part of me wanted to unpack and settle in and have sheets that were my own and apartments that didn't smell like a million other things but me. And eventually we made it back to Brooklyn, and we took over a 3-month lease of a person who had to move out. And at the end of the 3 months, which will be in September, we are going to sign a lease in Brooklyn. It's going to be a year lease. Who knows? You know what? I don't have fear of commitment of signing this lease because I always think in the back of my head, you know what, Jen? You can break it. So if we get annoyed with living in one place, we could always pack up and go. Do I recommend that you do the same? I don't know. It's up to you. It's your life. If you don't know if that's something you want to do, then don't think that, you know what, it sounds cool, I'm going to do it. Instead, maybe you rent out your apartment for a week in December when you have a week off of work and you travel to a new city and you live there for a week. Or maybe you just pick up and go to a new city on a weekend and spend time just roaming around and seeing if you like it. But I do truly believe that movement is great for us in our lives and chaos is great for us in our lives, because if we don't plan our own chaos, life will plan it for us. So if you're ever interested in trying something new, living somewhere new, I highly recommend you give it a go. It's a lot less scary than you think. The scariest part is committing to going. Laura asked in the group, what has been your most favorite place you lived? That's a great question. I think it's split between two. I absolutely adored Portland, Oregon. It was the first place we lived in on this adventure, and I knew nothing about it. And when I got there, I was so romanced by the city. There's coffee shops and bookstores, and it's a beautiful city to walk around. You get to meet some really awesome down-to-earth people in Portland. And yeah, the weather is a bit of a bummer. I think it rained almost every day we were there, and it was a little bit cold. You're wearing a bunch of jackets and raincoats and rain boots, but you get used to it. I'm from Florida, and before I moved to New York, I had never seen snow, and people were like, oh, you're going to be frozen. But the thing is, like, you just wear the right clothing, you bundle up, and you get used to that lifestyle. And that's sort of how I felt about Portland, is everyone says, oh, it's such a great city, but the weather's terrible. It's such a great city, and you get used to the weather. The other place I absolutely adore living, it's always been a part of my soul, my identity, is California. We lived on Venice Beach for a couple months, and I've always been charmed by California. I lived there once earlier in my 20s, and I always just loved the vibe of it. I feel like I am a person who's meant to be by the water, so when I was living in Venice Beach in LA, I felt very much at home and at peace. At the time I lived there, one of my really good friends, Molly, was also living in LA, and it was really nice to just have a solid friend in a city that I lived in, because for most of our travels, we didn't know anybody in the city, and it was fine. Adam and I had a great time together, but it's always nice having that outlet in that person, and having Molly there was amazing, because we're sort of on the same wavelength when it comes to working our butts off and creating interesting things. She's the founder of Messy.fm, the podcast software, and the author of Reach Out, and during the time I lived there, on and off, we started some projects together. I started this podcast from there, and a lot of amazing things happened just because we would spend hours just brainstorming with each other. Jess wants to know, who is the most interesting person you've met on your travels? What did they teach you? Wow, that is such a brilliant, fantastic question. And I think I have to think really hard about that, because I met a lot of really amazing people throughout my time traveling the country and living in a new city. And I think maybe one of the most awesome people that I met, you know what? I'm not going to say person. I'm going to be honest with you. We were living in Austin, Texas, and one of the things we did in Austin, Texas was we lived in Adam's friend's apartment, because she traveled with her fiance at the time, and we babysat their apartment and their two pit bulls. And this was the first time in my life where I was responsible for a dog myself. I had a dog growing up, but I was a kid, so it wasn't really my responsibility. But here we were living in Austin, and we had these two giant pit bulls to take care of, and I was really scared at first because I didn't know if I had what it takes to babysit a dog. I mean, I know that sounds crazy. A lot of you are dog owners and you're like, come on, Jen, you could do it. But I have always been so used to living on my own schedule. And, you know, my typical day in my life is I leave the apartment at 6 a.m. and I don't come back till 10 p.m. And here I was having to worry about other things. And I got to tell you, it was the best. These dogs became such a huge part of my happiness and my love for Austin, Texas, just walking them around, caring for them, and the love I got from them. I think it taught me that I'm not as selfish as I think, and I think it did tell me that I find happiness in animals. And I know that sounds crazy. It's not really answering your question, but I think that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. Oswald wants to know, how does it feel being a bride-to-be yourself as someone who runs a bridesmaid for hire business? I've gotten that question a lot. Every time someone finds out I'm engaged, they go, oh my God, you're finally the bride. And I think, yes. And I don't know how to feel about it. I'm so used to being on the other side, so used to being the bridesmaid, helping the bride, pep talking her. And here I am sort of freaking out a little bit. The first week I was engaged, I thought I had to do everything. I was researching venues, I was making guest lists, I was freaking out. And then I said to myself, you know what, Jen, this is what you would tell brides. Take time to enjoy being engaged and don't worry about all this stuff. And about a month's passed. To be honest with you, Adam and I have zero plans at all. We talk about it sometimes, but it's not a major focus of our lives. We're both working our butts off with our careers. We both know we want to get married. We both don't really care about a wedding right now. And maybe when one day we sit down and figure it out, we'll know. But I think being the bride has shown me, yeah, I finally get how stressful it is, because You have to have answers to all these questions, and if you don't, people give you their opinions. Daniel wants to know, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself some advice, what would it be? I think it would be that everything works out how it should be. I know that for a lot of times in my life, some of the hardest moments were when I could not see the future and I panicked. And the first true moment I felt this was when I graduated college. I did not have a job. I remember thinking my resume was a joke. It was half of a page. It said that I majored in poetry and that I had 2 internships. And I just remember thinking, there's no future for me. You know, I was a real hit in college. I did a lot of things. I was the president of my sorority. I was pretty popular, right? And now here I am literally moving back to my parents' home with nothing. And I couldn't see a future. I couldn't figure out what my life would look like. There was no linear path for me. And I remember being really, really scared. And it was such a tough time because my personality, I'm someone who needs to know A, B, C, D. How are things gonna fall into place? And I couldn't. And more recently, when I had something pretty devastating happen to me in the past couple of years, I couldn't see what the outcome was going to be. I just couldn't sit there and say, okay, everything's going to be okay. And people around me were like, you know what, Jen, with time, things will be normal. It'll be like nothing happened. And I just couldn't see that as the truth. But I got to tell you, throughout some of the really tough times in my life where I did not see that finish line, I did not see that end, it always came. So I think if there was something to tell my younger self, it would be, Jen, trust that you're strong enough to get through anything. And that, well, right now, everything seems like a chaotic, disgusting, horrible, weird mess that you can't get out of. Nothing in this world lasts. Gabby wants to know, how do you balance your relationship and your career? Well, that's a tough one. I think it's really interesting because Adam and I both have a similar career path in the sense that we work from home, we work from ourselves, we're driven by ourselves. We don't have bosses over our heads demanding things from us. We don't have a salary. We both have to hustle. So I think it's interesting because one downside is that if it's up to us, we would spend every waking hour doing work. And yeah, maybe some days we do work side by side at a co-working space or in our apartment or at a coffee shop, but we're mostly working. And it's weird because before I met Adam, that's really all I did. I think I ruined a lot of friendships because I would spend Saturday and Sunday in my apartment working rather than going out with friends. And if it was up to Adam and I think we would both do that still. But one of the things that I've sort of stepped into is saying, enough, we need to take a break. You know, it's 2 p.m., let's go for a 20-minute walk. Or it's Friday night, let's dump the computers and go out and do something. So I think, look, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is 50-50, and that's not how it is here. I think it's what's going on right now in the moment and how do we make time for what we can. I think if we think about balance, we stress ourselves out because that means we have to constantly be choosing one thing over another. And I think more realistically, it's all about what do you want to focus on right now and then what can you make time for so that your relationship doesn't fall apart. And maybe that's a conversation before you go to bed about how the day was, or maybe it's a lunchtime with no technology where you just talk through how everything's going. Or, you know, there was one weekend where I just said, I've worked so hard this week, I can't talk about work at all this weekend, and we didn't. So I think balance should be thrown out the window, and it should just be more about a conversation to make sure that you're getting what you need in that moment. Caitlin wants to say, what do you do if you like your job but have negative coworkers, which makes you like your job less? Now, I think that's interesting. I remember I have worked a couple jobs in my life, you know, at companies, and there was one of them that I liked. I liked the job a lot, but I didn't like my boss. And I think that that made the job really tough because these are the people you have to see every single day. And because of that, it inspires how you react and how your attitude is. I mean, there's that quote, which you might say is cliche, but I think it's really, really true, that you are most like the 5 people you surround yourself with. And if you're going to a workplace every day where people are bringing you down, that is stressing you out, and you don't even see how badly it's taking a toll on you. And I'm not saying quit your job, but I am saying maybe you have a conversation with some of these people and find out why they are so negative and why they do have this attitude. And maybe if you can, you surround yourself with other people at the job. But I do think it's going to be a constant punching bag situation if you surround yourself with people who are making you like this job a whole lot less. Erin says, carry anything weird or unusual in your daily bag. I like that question. You know what? I think the weirdest thing I carry around are socks, and they're mispaired socks. They're not one pair. I never wear matching socks, by the way. I just grab 2 socks and I'm on my way. But why I carry socks is because I like my days are so hectic. Sometimes I'm out of the house again from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And maybe during the day I have like a little bit of a break, an hour or so. So I like to try to work out. And I find that if there are workout classes I can join, it's easier to do like a spin class or a Pilates class where you don't need sneakers, because then I don't have to carry sneakers. So I always carry socks. Usually I just wear a sports bra and bring some sort of bottom as well, that I can just hop into one of these classes if I have some time. And sure, sometimes my bag has like 6 pairs of mismatched socks, but it's probably the weirdest thing I carry around. Lily says, how do you deal with maintaining close relationships with friends while traveling around so much? Whew. I think that's a tough question, and I don't think I'm the right person to answer it. I don't. I think that when I did travel around so much, it did hurt some of my friendships because I wasn't here for birthdays and I wasn't here for big events, and I really just wasn't here. And when I did come back to New York, it was a battle of, okay, I'm back here to work 16, 20-hour days, and maybe I can fit in an hour or so, but it made it really, really challenging, and it's hard to explain that to a person. And maybe I did let a lot of people down, I'm not quite sure, but look, I don't think it's easy. And I've never been the kind of person who is good at keeping in touch. I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not a good texter. I'm not a good person to remember to call people. I think about people. I love them dearly, but I'm not the queen of keeping in touch. And I think if you're good at that, then maintaining friendships is very easy. And if you're not, I think you need to make a huge, huge, huge effort. And one of the things I have tried to do to be a better friend is remind myself twice a month, maybe 3 times a month, to reach out to my friends and say, hey, how are you? What's going on? What's new? And have quality conversations with them, because I'm not there in person. And I think that makes it better than months going by without you talking to them. But I will completely admit that I am not the best at this. Lily also says, how do you work through challenges when lifestyles change between friends? Like when friends start having kids and they change how much time and effort they can give. Also, not good at answering this one. Most of my friends got married and had kids in their early mid-20s, and I didn't. And I moved away from Florida, and I had this weird, crazy life. And, I did lose touch with a lot of them. I remember this happened 2 years ago. I saw on Facebook that all my friends, like a group of friends that were all friends in college, it was like our crew, all of them went on a trip together, and nobody invited me. No one told me, no one asked me, and I remember feeling so upset, thinking, oh, I thought we were still friends, like I thought I would at least be invited, and it hurt me so badly. And a big part of that was because growing up, I was always the person left out. I was always the one not invited to things. I was always the one made fun of, and here I saw on Facebook was the group of people I was the closest friends with in college, and most of them are married with kids, and I wasn't invited. I remember I called them out on this. I said something, and basically, they fought back and said, well, you don't involve us in your life, and you never tell us what's going on, and you never, you're not there for us, and all this stuff. And I just felt really, really shitty. And our friendships really haven't been the same since. And when I talk to my mom about this, one of the things she always says is that, people, they grow apart, they change, and maybe they come back together. Maybe one day when I'm married with kids that we'll be friends again and we'll be close again. But I think the thing with friendship is that we have these expectations that they last forever, and hopefully they do, and some of them will, but most of them won't. And I think that's okay, because we're all growing, we're all changing, and while they have huge lifestyle changes, you do too, Lily. You have badass things you are working on. I know that personally about you. And I think sometimes it's okay to maybe put those friendships on pause, especially if those people are not including you in their lives either. And that's really the only solution I have for that. Lisa wants to know, what is your favorite season? I was actually thinking about this the other day, because coming from Florida, you don't have seasons in Florida, so it's not like you necessarily have favorites. But since living in New York City on and off for the past 8 years, I have found a true love for fall. I never thought I was a fall person, but the other day I saw someone post something about Halloween and how it's coming up, and I felt so excited because I really do love the fall sense of, breeze in the air, and I love the pumpkins, and I love just the idea that there is a rapid season changing from summer. I feel like spring is very close to summer, and then when fall comes, you get a little bit of a taste of the winter, which is sort of nice because the winter is way too cold, it's frozen, it's awful, but the fall is that nice transition time, and there's a sense of hope in the air, and the year's almost over, but it's not over, so you can sort of, procrastinate a little bit more, and I don't know, I'm super excited for the fall this year. Our final question comes from Samantha. She wants to know, what is your favorite activity to do if you have nothing going on one weekend? Wow. So I would say that one of my favorite things to do, if I could have a Saturday to myself, I would wake up super early. I would go to the coffee shop down the street. It's called The Bean. And I would sit there and I would spend 2 hours just writing. And I never really plan what I'm going to write, if it's a project I'm working on or if it's just something I want to write for Instagram, but I just write for 2 hours. And it's the most therapeutic, beautiful thing. And I feel like I am at my most true self when I'm doing that. After that, my other activities, I love walking around with no game plan. I think that's why when I'm back in New York City, I feel really awesome because every other city you have to know where you're heading to. You have to have a car in most of them or you just have to know. But in New York City, you can literally just put on your sneakers, go outside and walk in one direction and see where you end up. And one of my favorite things to do on the weekend is walk the bridges, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, and just explore different areas. I'm also a huge reader. I'm addicted to books, so I have stacks and stacks of books I want to try to get through very soon, and I'll spend hours doing that. And of course, if you know me, you know I love pizza, so I like to fill my days with as much pizza as possible. Yeah, I have my favorite spots, but I'm always open to trying new, cheap, and greasy pizza. Hey, thank you all so much for these questions. I hope I answered them the best that I can. If you have more, come hang out in the Secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. We're all happy to answer those questions there. And if you like this podcast, you know it would mean the world if you just scroll down, you hit the subscribe button, and you hit the comment button. You rated us 5 stars, and you left us a really cool review. All you got to do is just scroll down on your phone to make that happen. Thanks so much. Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for a good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.